This podcast has been brought to you by Cine.nl. This must you see.
Will you please listen up to what I have to say? Cause we're in for some old-fashioned wrestling today. Not the violent, oily opposerish kind, but the kind that involves pins and thumbs you will find. Cause it's thumb wrestling time. Yes, it's thumb wrestling time. So we will discuss pros and cons, faults and pluses of all your favorite movies. And we will ponder the merits of cinema in this WrestleMania. Cause it's thumb wrestling time. Yes, it's thumb wrestling time. Yes, it's thumb wrestling time.
Hello, pod people. Wow. That's from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Welcome back to the Thumb Wrestling Movie Podcast, the show in which I invite guests to come over and have a chat about a certain film about which he or she disagrees with me, which is Ruud Vos. I am a Dutch person. And we're already at episode 59 seconds, episode 59 Middle Lane. And I'm very pleased that I can finally release this episode, which I already recorded a while back on the 22nd of January, because I have been very happy about it for quite a long time, and now finally it's going out. Because I had a very fun chat with none other than movie director Brendan Steere. Now, he lives in Pasadena, which is 9 time zones away, so I only had him over in the virtual sense. We spoke via Zoom. And Brendan directed the VelociPastor, which is very much a pastiche of very bad B movies. Or as he would call it himself, a circular comedy. He's written an article on the fact, and I will put a link in the description. Now, during Corona times, the VelociPastor went viral, and because of that, there's an interview with Brendan in a Dutch movie magazine called Schokkend News, which is for fans of horror movies and other genre movies. It came out 2 days before this podcast, so if you haven't read it, go pick it up. And the interview was done by a previous podcast on this podcast, Theodor Steen, with whom I spoke about Jupiter Ascending. Now, he also arranged for this interview, so shout out and thanks to Theodor for arranging this. And I had a very, very fun chat with Brendan about a very special movie, 50 Shades Darker. The 2017 sequel to 50 Shades of Grey, directed by James Foley. A very bad movie. And I think that if you haven't watched it already, you're probably not gonna. So I sort of banking on the fact that you will listen to this podcast anyway. You know, just for laughs. And Brendan, he has a weird appreciation for this movie. He gave it 5 stars on Letterboxd. And he knows what movie this is. It's just, well, you will hear his glee for it is real. It's interesting. So 50 Shades Darker. Now this is quite hard to make a summary of. Let's say that Christian Grey, played by Jamie Dornan, and Anastasia Steele, who's portrayed by Dakota Johnson, they have broken up in the first movie, their S&M-ish relationship, because he actually hurt her quite bad. Now, in this movie, this sequel, within 5 minutes, they are back together, and their relation is now put to the test by certain weird things, like a stalker, ex-girlfriend of Christian's, a helicopter crash, which Christian narrowly escapes, and also the new boss of Anastasia, Jack, who is quite rapey, to say the least. And already I'm making this movie sound way more interesting than it is. It's boring to watch. It's mostly just conversations between Christian and Anastasia, and at certain intervals they have sex, sometimes a bit naughty sex. And that's it. And the weird thing is it takes itself quite seriously. Also very weird. So yeah, that's what this movie is. So, well, before we head into this conversation, first this.
Show me the money.
if you are a frequent listener to this podcast and you are quite happy with it and you're thinking, I would like to support this podcast in a certain way, well, you can. You can give us a small monthly donation on our Patreon page. Go to patreon.com/duimpjeworstelen, yes, Dutch word, and there you can pick a plan to, just support the podcast for a little money, and in exchange for that, you get some nice little benefits. So let's quickly head over to this very cool conversation I had with Brendan about 50 Shades Darker.
3, 2, 1, fight!
50 Shades Freed.
Excellent.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Darker. Whoa.
Darker, right?
Whoa, my mistake. They truly both, the second two run together in my head as just a perfect symphony. So.
All right.
So
they have been filmed simultaneously as well.
Yes.
So that does make sense.
Yeah.
But I do have to say that I'd never watched 50 Shades Darker before you asked me to. I've seen it twice now. And I haven't seen part 1 or part 3, and I'm not really
yes. Honestly,
in a mind space where I think that I want to do that.
I was kind of hoping that would be your experience with it, because I have a very weird history with these films. I saw all 3 on opening day, and I never read the books. I did not have any interest in the books. What happened was, it was Los Angeles. I was in Los Angeles, and my friend from my band happened to be visiting. And so as a joke, I was like, yo, it's Valentine's Day. Let's go see 50 Shades of Grey. And so we both went, and it isn't very good. It's kind of boring and like not an enjoyable film.
I think that you have a very main part of my criticism.
Yes.
Right there.
Yeah.
But please expand.
It's like the first 50 Shades of Grey is barely a movie. It's like it's so strange, because essentially the central conflict in the movie is whether Anastasia and Christian will sign a non-disclosure agreement, essentially a contract.
Yeah.
That's like the entire action of the film. But the problem is that there are zero stakes, because they end up fucking the whole time anyway. It's not like the contract is saying, like, we will not have sex until we sign this. It's not like that at all. It's just sort of a contract for a steady relationship. So there's, like, literally no stakes in the movie. The whole thing is just you watching these two losers who, like, I don't even understand why they like each other, sort of falling in love. And so it's not very good, and I walked out of it sort of like, whatever. Then the next year came around.
When I saw this movie for the first time.
And 50 Shades Darker was coming out, and,
And you thought, hell yeah, I have to see this.
Yeah, I was sort of like, I knew they had changed directors. And I was so tired of seeing all the stupid signs up around LA for it. And what really sold me was I kind of liked the Taylor Swift Zayn song. It just kept coming on the radio. And every time it came on, I would turn to my girlfriend at the time and be like, yo, we should go see 50 Shades Darker. And so that's what we ended up doing. And
But she took you seriously immediately when you said that? Or did she know that you were in a jokey mood or something like that? Or did you think you were just kidding, you don't want to see this?
No. She knows me. So she knew exactly where this was coming from. And in fact, I think she had also been there as the third wheel at the first 50 Shades of Grey. Anyway.
Yeah.
We go see 50 Shades Darker. And what astounds me about this film is that it's somehow... All right, so there's a lot happening in this, honestly. First of all, it's like... I was thinking last night about what is the story of 50 Shades Darker, right? And
yes, I foresee that I have a lot of trouble doing the summary at the start of this episode.
Right,
but, yeah.
Right? And it's just like... there's no... Once again, it's barely a movie, but it's... Okay, so it is literally what 50 Shades Darker is a sequel.
Yeah, this is like is this your mini review or just a sort of a summary?
This is just sort of a summary.
Yeah.
It's a sequel to a film that was derived from a novel, that was adapted from a fan fiction, that was adapted from a film, that was adapted from a book. You know, like that's what.
So the fan fiction is of the film, not even of the book itself.
Yeah. So what 50 Shades of Grey
Weird.
is, the original 50 Shades of Grey, the book, is that it was a fan fiction for Twilight that a woman in Britain wrote and adapted into a book, that they then adapted into a movie, that they then made a sequel to with the second book of hers. It's like, it's just, the story itself has been through like so many weird permutations, and I don't even know what it is anymore. It's just sort of all...
And it gets even weirder, because apart from just having a part 3 of this film series and this book series, she also wrote another novel called Grey, which is another ripoff of her ripoff, basically, where she tells the story again through the eyes of Christian.
Yeah, and what's really incredible to me about this, really interesting, honestly, is that, like, the story's not good. Like, the story is essentially, the stakes of the story are, like, will they stay together? Will they, you know, be a couple? That's basically what the struggle is in the film.
And it doesn't even have the contract anymore.
No, it doesn't even have the contract. So
it says renegotiations at the start, and it just brushes that off, and it's gone.
Right by. Don't worry about it. So what ends up happening is that literally it's just all these outside forces like assaulting their relationship in increasingly lunatic fashion. Like, there's a helicopter crash in this movie that Christian walks away from because they, like, need to put him in danger, and then he needs to seemingly simultaneously walk in the door and be like, where's my girl? It's like, it's...
Even the weirder thing about that part is that he's proposed to her, but he has done that before that, not because he's learned a lesson, like, I need Anna... And he has the answer with him all that time because she's given it to him as a present.
He was always there.
And so there is absolutely no... doesn't make him realize anything, doesn't make her realize anything, and doesn't mean anything for anything else because she just walks away from it. Now, I know why it's in there, because a bit of research that I did do was watch this video essay by Dan Olsen.
Oh, hell yeah.
He's the lukewarm... defense of the 50 Shades series.
Yeah, I think it's a great...
In Folding Ideas.
It's a great video series. I really liked that one.
It is. So I know it's there because Jack is set up as the villain and he's supposedly behind the attack. But all that just makes it even more insane.
Yeah, it's like what ends up happening is that essentially, I was thinking about this yesterday when watching it, is that this is first of all, this is a $55 million movie about... will these two people fuck? And the answer is consistently yes. And seemingly they cannot be stopped by a crazy ex-girlfriend with a gun, a helicopter crash, a rapist, or like finally his big ex. And that's basically what the story is. But it's just it's so many weird fragments. Like the character of Jose, I am obsessed with. Jose. So
the guy who's there because he's like the 50 Shades version of Jacob.
Yes, yeah.
But he gets brushed aside so quickly in the first novel and film, and he just sticks around for no reason.
No reason. He is my favorite character in the franchise because he's just such a... Every single scene that Jose is in, he's like, Anna, I love you, and she doesn't realize it happened and just brushes right past him, and then it gives him like a close-up being like, oh man, and then it just keeps going. And I'm just, it's interesting to me, honestly, that like these characters exist, because if this was a, you know, being adapted or written from the ground up like a normal romance screenplay, none of this would be there. Like, all of this would just be gone. They're like weird artifacts that are in this film.
If I would have to guess what happened here was that E.L. James was just writing the story bit by bit, not going back to anything, making things connect or making it sharp or work or anything, just writing stuff, and stuff needs to happen.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And in the end, she reverse engineers it that the helicopter was sabotaged by Jack because, that will be a good thing. And Jack had a motive all along for despising Christian.
Yep.
Which turns out that they were in a foster home together, which Christian does not remember at all.
He doesn't remember.
So very weird.
Don't worry about it.
Exactly. And it's in the movie they have to keep these things in because they do have to set up the third movie, but they don't think of rearranging stuff to make it a bit more sleek and make stuff happen for a reason or anything. It just is there in that order. And
yes, exactly. And so it's just... It almost reminds me, well, and it makes sense because of how it was written, but it reminds me of like an old film serial or something, or even episodic TV where it's just this series of like up and then down and up and then down, and everything is just
it's a bit like what The Walking Dead has turned into.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And so
if I'm being harsh on The Walking Dead, but still,
no, I agree with you. Yeah, and so all of this is just weird. Like that there was this book that was made from a fanfic that they made a movie into, and they didn't change it. And they threw like $55 million at it. So it's sleek as hell. It's like, honestly...
It looks really good.
Yeah, and honestly, as a genuine compliment, I think Dakota Johnson comes out looking really good. I think that she actually makes Anna likable and cute and like as much as she can.
Yeah. I think, well, you can see that she can act. I do think she makes her likable, but she also looks kind of bored with everything.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
There is a thing where they just seem bored all the time. It's a very humorless relationship.
Yes.
And even when they're joking with each other, there is no sense of them having fun.
None.
It's just so flat the way they do it. And I've written a couple of them down, I hope you're not a sore loser, that depends on how hard you spank me, which is a very cute line, but she says it so seriously.
Yeah, she's just so...
Not even like, don't you think I'm clever?
No, she's on his level, dude. That's the thing.
Yeah.
They're the perfect couple. they I don't know.
No, but the thing is, I'm happy for them because they enjoy fucking each other all the time. They're doing it every time. It's great. They're having fun. It's cool. I just don't think that out of that relationship should come a marriage.
No,
anything.
no, not at all. It's like the weirdest thing about this movie in particular, and part of the reason I think I'm so interested in it is that it's in no uncertain terms pornography. Like it's straight up like, this is candy, and we don't want you to be ashamed for eating this candy. We want you to have more. It's like it has obviously actually resonated with like a portion of the world's audience enough for them to be like, okay, let's make 2 more, each for like 50 to 60 million. And it's like...
And they show them on a ladies' night in the cinema here, and the place is packed, and with stalls, we're selling dildos and whatever, but yeah.
Yeah, and so I guess my whole reason that I really like this film, weirdly, is because it's almost like, it's like heterosexual camp. Somehow it's like, it's really funny, but it takes place in just this kind of pocket reality where nothing actually makes sense. Like it's
nothing really happens. Everything that does seem to happen, it's just blown away so quickly.
Yeah, and so it's just these constant life and death stakes. Like, it feels almost like it's like a spy film where they're so uninterested in the spy work and only interested in like who the spy will smooch. And I'm so weirdly fascinated with that.
I think it's very interesting to see that you gave this a 5-star letterbox review, and hearing you talk about it, you don't think this is a good movie at all, but it just makes you so happy.
Yeah, well, because it's sort of like, first of all, 2 things. Speaking as the guy who directed the VelociPastor, I've spent a lot of time thinking about like what is good and bad in movies, right?
Yeah.
And like really considering the question. And what I've landed on is that, yeah, it's about catharsis. That's like why we go to movies. That's why we like movies. And for art films, that catharsis can be greater knowledge. It can be greater like understanding of a difficult subject or something. And for popular entertainment, it's an emotion. It's sort of like, I want to feel action. I want to feel horror. I want to feel these different things. And so, if one of those films it really resonates, it like persists in the public memory, it has sort of succeeded. I don't want to put a money value on it because that's not always true. Some movies make a bunch of money and then we all immediately forget about them.
Or the other way around.
Exactly. So it's really just what stories persist in the public consciousness. And so this one has. And I think it's because it fucking rules. It's like, it literally, it is, like I said, it is candy. And it's here to be like, hey, did you want chocolate? Have some more. Have some wine. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. Like, I think that actually does have value because the film is not pretending to be anything other than that. I timed it this time. The sex scenes take place at minute 20, minute 40, minute 60, and then 15 minutes before the end, which was a 35-minute gap. So it was just sort of perfectly structured that every 20 minutes, it was sort of like, yeah, we'll have like a nice, like, cool sex scene, and then it'll be back to nonsense that sort of has you just being like, what? Okay, we're doing this, and then it's like, cool, more sex. And I don't know, I genuinely appreciate the clockwork like nature of that. It's like, that's a well-structured, edited movie to me. But that, right. So I really do like the film. I do. It's fucking...
Like, there goes some actual craft in this, and you can very much appreciate that.
Yeah, and appreciate it for them trying to craft a perfect erotic popcorn movie. Like, which is a genre that doesn't really exist in America, certainly not at this budget level.
But so it's more like the illusion of momentum than actual story momentum, but it's there enough to make people think that something is happening in screen.
Yeah, well, because essentially, I heard this screenwriting term once called like the lie that the character believes, which which I always thought was a really eloquent way to put it. And the lie that Anna believes is that she's not good enough for Christian, or that he will sort of like go away from her. And I'm not going to lie, if you watch it through that lens, if you take away like all the other stuff, and this movie is about a girl who doesn't think she's good enough for her boyfriend, then actually every trial and tribulation tests that in a weird and interesting way. And every time she succeeds by having sex, it's like it really is kind of well structured. And the last thing, the final scene in the movie, is that the Mrs. Robinson, the woman that taught Christian how to fuck, basically his biggest ex. He still has an emotional connection to her. She comes up to Anna.
And a financial connection.
Yeah. She comes up to Anna and like literally says to her, like, you're not good, like her greatest fear. Anna tosses shit in her face. She gets escorted out. The richness is like bestowed upon her, and she gets married or engaged with fireworks. And I'm like,
engaged for the second time, basically.
Yeah. And I'm like, that's a good movie. that is a movie that has given me exactly what I wanted.
But the first time I watched it, I was just bored.
Yes.
I
didn't understand why.
I sort of knew a bit of what it was, but I thought it would at least have been naughtier.
Yes,
a bit more explicit, and it just wasn't that at all. Yeah. And the second time, when you know what's coming, I did enjoy it more. I didn't appreciate some of the moments a heck of a lot more.
Yeah.
But it also made me wonder, like, you have all these things that are unintentionally funny, but will even the scene where Jack tries to rape her in the office, will that even become intentionally funny? And I do have to say that it didn't.
Yeah.
But in a worse way than you might think, because I didn't. I sort of tried to keep my mind with it when it was starting that scene, and I knew that it was coming, so I thought I have to pay attention to see if this is funny, and I zoned out. At some point, he is over her and he's doing that thing, and I've missed the whole lead up to it, the whole thing that's supposed to be like.
I'm sorry, there was a knock at my door. Be right back.
Yeah, no worries.
I am so sorry. I thought it might be like a neighbor or somebody coming to tell me to keep it down. It was a package of the 50 Shades trilogy on Blu-ray that I bought last night. And so I am so sorry to have interrupted you, but also
no worries, this
kind
is,
of perfect.
This is Providence. Yeah, exactly.
I'm so sorry you were in the middle of saying that.
That is fine. It was a perfect spot for a jingle.
Wow.
So
I did not plan that. That was
But so at some point I just realized that he's standing over her, and it's the whole menacing thing. And I think it's not really that bad if it didn't become intentionally funny, because it put some weight on it. I thought, well, maybe this is even worse because being bored by that scene.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I get why people are bored with these movies. I really do, because nothing happens. like truly, the plot is. I will say it is a little funny because in the final one they cram it so full of plot that it's kind of hard to keep everything straight. But especially in the first two, it's like nothing much happens, and that's why I think I am so fascinated by them. A couple of things. First of all, honestly,
do you prefer 1 and 2 over 3 before you go into those things?
Yes, I the order is 2, 3, 1 to me. That's the best order.
Okay. Right.
But yeah, I am also fascinated by the fact that the sex itself is not actually very explicit and is almost sort of like it's so funny because the sexiness of it is that is almost an illusion, right? Where they keep being like, oh, it's gonna be so fucking we're gonna be so dirty, and then you get there and it's like shown like that, but it's not actually anything really bad. They basically just have sex, and sometimes he lightly spanks her, and
I didn't even see any spanking noticeably in part 2 of it.
Yep.
He has the leg spreader, but that doesn't seem to hurt her. She just is able to turn around, so she's a bit more at his command. And with the handcuffs,
yes, of course,
shackles,
of course,
maybe more. But then he also shows her nipple clamps, how they work, lets her feel it, but not on her nipples.
Yes.
It's just on her finger, and they don't use them.
Yes, yeah. Well, and I
don't see how the leg spreaders are worse than that, because when she takes that out, asks, what is this? He goes, hey, let's not run before we can walk.
Right.
Why?
No, I agree, because I was like, first and foremost, Christian, other way around there, buddy. But second of all, but this is also part of what's interesting to me, actually, because, okay, once again, these stories, bad as they are, resonated with a lot of people. So it's obvious that this is a fantasy, a really valid fantasy for people.
Yeah.
And I think the appeal of 50 Shades is that it gives you the illusion of it being this really dirty, it's, oh man, that they really are S&Ming, without it actually being that. That is the appeal of it, is what I'm trying to say. And it's really interesting to me that the movie perfectly reflects that, in as much as when you kind of take it from afar, what these people are doing is not really all that transgressive or weird or or anything worthy of all the angst around it, honestly.
No.
And yeah,
I've never seen The Book Club. Have you seen that? I think it's called The Book Club.
I have not seen it. No.
No, it's a British movie where a couple of housewives start reading 50 Shades of Grey in a book club, and it enhances their private lives
Oh, there you go.
in many ways.
Yeah, which is once again just a tribute.
I thought we were British anyway.
Yeah, I remember the film you're talking about. I have not seen it.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating because it's sort of like, once again, 50 Shades of Grey has cemented itself in our public consciousness enough to have a movie made about it. To have a second movie that has nothing to do with the actual, that's weird.
But I do know that a part of the appeal, especially of the first novel, is not just that it's a bit naughty and a bit off the cuff. Oh, wow.
Right.
How far they're going. There are plenty of women, I understand, who think that Christian is a very desirable boyfriend because he showers her with gifts and stuff like that.
Sure.
And he seems to care for her because he's paying attention.
Yep.
But is it the right attention? That's very disputable. But a friend of my girlfriend, she said, I would like to very much have a Christian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm looking for a Christian when she's on dating sites.
Yeah.
It is a very weird thing.
Well, and it's sort of the ultimate 21st century version of the shitty Byronic male romantic lead, where it's like in all of those Jane Austen books, or some of them, and literature throughout time, there's been this obvious sexual fantasy of sort of a powerful man who is a bit dangerous, but is also very, very just powerful. And that's sort of the fantasy of it, where you're both kind of in their thrall like a vampire, but also the vampire is dangerous. This is an essential sexual fantasy for a lot of people. And I think what's so weird about 50 Shades of Grey is that, so the power Christian has is his money. He's like Jeff Bezos. He's got God money. He can just sort of buy anything or sell anything and fix.
He buys airlines.
Like it's
shopping.
nothing.
That's
And the movie is also always very careful to not tell you what he does. It's sort of like he does business. He works in business.
Exactly.
And the danger of him is, of course, that he's a bit possessive and a bit possessive. He's very possessive and very, the S&M stuff.
It's made very explicit also by...
yes, yeah.
By Anna saying stuff like a relationship is not ownership, stuff like that.
Yeah. And so it's really interesting to me to see that this is the 21st century version of it, like the post 9/11, post financial crash version of it, where all of a sudden what is most desirable isn't I don't know, a spiritually powerful boyfriend or something. It's a guy who's rich. And a guy who's like a rich dick. And so it's, I don't know. It's fascinating to me how they bend over backwards to try and make that palatable. Because the only real way they can do it where he's not outright abusive is to have Anna constantly kind of be like, hell yeah, but I'm into it. And then keep going. And it's just weird.
And they have to put in another character who is outright abusive to say, well, he's not as bad as
Exactly. They have to put in fucking Jack Hyde, cinema's greatest villain, to just have him go in 2 or 3 scenes from oh, he's such a nice boss, to he's an actual rapist maniac. It's so weird.
And the even weirder part of it is that the woman from HR tells Anna to, yes, go have drinks with him. That would be good. That's bonding.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's we got I don't know what was happening in that office. I also love her. The character of Hannah was not in the first film, her workplace friend. Okay. So literally they just brush right past it, and they're like, and she's got an office bestie, and then they just keep going. I don't know. It's nearly allegorical filmmaking to me. It's just kind of like a Grecian myth or something.
And Dan Olsen also raised the point of how they had to introduce Mrs. Jones, the housekeeper, very explicitly in part 2 because she wasn't in part 1.
Yes, she just
and she has no function at all.
None. Even it occurred to me also, even the introduction of Christian is so funny because the first shot you see him in is just sort of like a nothing it doesn't look all that dissimilar to like what our webcams look like right now. It's just sort of a straight on shot, and he steps into frame and he goes, Anna. And like it's like the least interesting introduction to a protagonist, because it already assumes that you know who this guy is, that like you know where this is going. You've seen the posters. And it's just strange to me. It's an interesting film in all of those senses to me. That there's like a weird, I don't know, interplay between it and the audience that doesn't make sense. But apparently does, make people happy. It made me happy, I'll tell you that. I was very, very happy seeing this again.
You're a fake and a phony, and I wish I never laid eyes on you.
Something that also struck me as kind of weird, especially just experience-wise, was that the first time I watched it, I saw on the screen music by Danny Elfman.
Yes, yeah.
And immediately after I saw that and was impressed by it, I forgot it.
Yep.
And then the second time I put it on, I saw it again, and I thought, oh yeah, Danny Elfman did the music. I completely forgot about that. What's the music like? And then at some point I timed about 40 minutes before the end of the movie, I remembered, oh yeah, Danny Elfman did the music, but have I heard any music by now? It's some...
No. I think he composed...
And then right after that you get a scene with music where I did hear it, and it's just... It's something that's layered on top of a scene, and it goes on for a bit too long because it doesn't change the momentum of the scene at all. It's just there. It's filler music.
Yeah.
Because movies need to have music in it to tell us how to feel a bit.
Yep.
And
yeah.
It didn't even do that very much.
No. It tells you to constantly be moody and anxious about something. And then every time that there is not his music, it's usually the sex scenes, because they usually have pop music. Like they'll do like a needle drop something. And also the boat.
The boat is also something that I forgot after having seen it the first time, and then someone said something about the boat, and I thought, were they on a boat? I had that during the movie, I think, the first time I watched it, and the second time I paid attention to it. And all right,
it's so good. It's just like the most lazy helicopter shots, and then it cuts into like them just sort of standing on the boat yelling at each other like happily. And then, all you need is that sweet Taylor Swift and Zayn music. Yeah.
And then they have that joke about the house, which doesn't even read as a joke.
It's like there's so little objective reality in the movie, because, like, Christian is rich enough to own the entirety of the United States, as far as we know. Like, he just can buy and sell anything.
He's a multi-billionaire. We know that.
Yes. Man, what a man! What a mighty fine man, indeed.
Yeah.
Really interesting though, and interesting to me that it was in fact literally adapted from a vampire novel, kind of. Like, now that I'm thinking about it, yep.
Now that businessmen are the modern vampires, and this makes it all the more explicit.
Yep. He's literally a vampire. I'm surprised they didn't have a scene where he like cut her a tiny bit, and he was just like, no, that's the sexy thing, and then like licked the blood. I maybe that happens in number 3. I'll have to watch it again.
Do you remember what was the first time you became aware of there existing something like 50 Shades of Grey?
I do. Funny thing is, I lived in New York at the time, New York City, and the subway. It was a very popular subway read.
Right,
because
more than one.
Yeah. And
always women, I guess.
No. It was
not even.
No, it was like a lot of people, because when it first came out, it was kind of I don't know. Nobody knew what it was. It didn't really have that stigma around it. It was just like a book cover that looked, kind of, sort of like Twilight, but you don't know what it is. And I just remember there were enough people that were reading it on the subway that I became aware of it. Like almost like a Harry Potter book or something had come out. Like you would always see like people always having it. And so I looked it up and I was like, oh, it's smut. Got it. And then moved on. And I truly didn't really think about it again until the movies came out. Because I was kind of like, oh, is this not that? Like, is there like a story to this? And the answer was no. And then I became even more interested over time, just with why this was what this was as a cultural thing. You know, like there are no more mainstream pornography titles. Like there's no more Deep Throat. There's no more anything like that. And so I just thought it was interesting to be like, yeah, wow, this is a mainstream porn film, like softcore porn, but a porn film.
Yeah.
And that is not only that, but relatively culturally accepted. Like everybody, you're kind of a weirdo if you like it, but it's not like, I don't know. It doesn't have quite the same stigma as being like...
It doesn't get more of a reaction then, really.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't think that I would like it at all, but all right, if you like it, whatever.
Exactly.
I think that's the sort of the vibe.
Yeah.
The first time I heard of 50 Shades of Grey was when I was working as sort of a news hound for the website of a newspaper, like one of those free newspapers that you get in the public transport. And the website was a bit more directed at, not at everyone, but more exactly at like males between 20 and 40 who like to go on the internet and look at pictures of women in bikinis.
Sure.
So we were very much encouraged to look for those. And at some point I got told, well, here's a series of a girl in a bikini on the beach. Why don't you put that online? And it was a supermodel reading 50 Shades of Grey on the beach.
Whoa. What a...
That's where I know it from. I don't even know which one it was.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. I mean, they came out almost back to back to back. Like, it was like...
All
it
right,
was very weird.
No, it was the first novel, but I don't know which model.
Yeah, which model. Yeah. Well, you know, here's the thing. 50 Shades has outlasted it. So...
Yeah.
But
I wonder how much longer it will last. I'm not sure if that in 50 years' time we will very much remember it, but it could be. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we'll remember it in the way we remember sort of periods of film. Like, when we look back on this period of American film, it's dominated by big Hollywood superhero stuff, like overwhelmingly. The same way that, like, in the 50s, there were a lot of radioactive monster movies or something. And, like, what that vibe is. You're sort of like, oh, right, yeah. I think that 50 Shades will be put in... It's sort of the apotheosis of another weird movement that was going on, which was... Harry Potter to Twilight to... Yeah,
the young adult movies.
Like, exactly. It is...
Maze Runner and all that sort of
absolutely. Thing. Hunger Games, Divergent, all of that. They all kind of look and feel the same. They all have that feel. Harry Potter, the most separate from, but, sort of obviously inspired.
But that's the thing that started.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that 50 Shades is part of that movement, that whatever that is. It's just it's the edgy one. And so I think we will remember it that way. I don't think that in 50 years it will be talked about as, like, still the new sexy book. I think, that would be like if we talked about Lady Chatterley's Lover as, like, the... I think that,
I don't think it has that endurance.
No.
I think it will be something that will be remembered by people who were at a certain age...
Yes.
Now, but I don't think they'll tell their daughters, hey, here's a thing you should watch.
No. The closest thing I think it has a precedent for is Flowers in the Attic, the weird V.C. Andrews stuff, where it was like that generation's kind of like, it's kind of sexy thing. And so I think it'll be remembered that way. I think it'll like hit a point, and Twilight as well will hit a point where it's just sort of like, and like then you move on. And so I don't know.
I haven't been fucked like this since grade school.
I'm going to make a bit of a link between 50 Shades Darker and your own movie, The VelociPastor, but I'm going to do it with a big way around because I watched VelociPastor, of course, in preparation for this, and I had a lot of fun with it.
Thank you so much.
And it reminded me of two things, especially because of the thing, the car burn at the start of the movie where it just says add the CGI of the burning car here.
Yeah.
First thing was Hail Caesar by the Coen Brothers.
Sure. Yep, I can see
Well,
that.
they have that divine presence to be shot,
Yes, yeah.
which I really liked. But then it's more of the internal in the film, where it's a joke like that. But also the mattiness of that, and which sort of continues in that, is with this thing here.
Oh,
which
yeah.
I wonder if you remember.
Yes. That was one of the biggest influences on me.
Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, to clarify for those.
Oh, yes, yeah. Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. It's like the Bible I used for VelociPastor. It was that and a film called Black Dynamite. I thought was...
also has that sort of thing. Where you have even a character saying stage directions on screen.
Yep. It's Black Dynamite is so worth the watch. It's one of those weird, like, perfect spoofs that is entertaining consistently and never gets old with what the gag is. And it apes the style of it so well. It was those two most directly influenced VelociPastor. I adore Dark Place. I think they really figured out the fun, how to make it the correct amount of meta. Like how to wink enough.
And also how to make it bad. They had people working very seriously to make it look bad, but by just thinking of stuff that could go wrong and then reproducing that and then doing that seriously.
Yes, exactly. It's like, it's so funny because I remember on VelociPastor, when you're directing, people ask you a lot of little questions a lot of the time. Yeah. Things that they'll be like, how high do we want this painting? Like things like that. Yeah. And I figured out, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but just by gut feeling, I figured out on VelociPastor when to tell them the dumbest thing I could think of. Like when you're with one of those questions, you're just like, do it stupid, and then like move on.
But that also makes me wonder, like, do you like to study property like 50 Shades Darker to look at how things go wrong but unintentionally wrong, and try to learn from that? Like, how can you turn that into something enjoyable?
Absolutely, yes. But also, I just think it's interesting to see movies that are of all different kinds of genres and styles, where it's the genre of 50 Shades Darker is very interesting to me because it doesn't really fit into anyone comfortably, and it's sort of like pushing at the constraints of those, and it's not doing it intentionally, but it's interesting to see. And it's interesting to see where it works, where it doesn't work, what parts people remember. My favorite scene in 50 Shades Darker, I keep wanting to say Freed, in 50 Shades Darker is where Christian on the pommel horse lifts himself up to So Lonely. But it's such a good scene. It is really funny. And it's also just like, there's no real reason for it to be in there besides to remind you that this dude is hot. And exactly. It's just interesting to me to see how scenes like that work, so they can either be applied to a comedic effect intentionally, so it can be funny, or to use it in a way if I'm trying to tell a different story. Like, you know how that affects you now. Like, one that I think is a very similar shot to that is the shot of Megan Fox leaning over the hood of the car in Transformers 1. Is like,
very much so.
It's a moment that is explicitly meant to make the audience go, fuck, and like move on. Like, that is the whole point of the shot. And so, I'm not saying Transformers 1 is great cinema, but I think it's interesting to know that, like, that's that shot. If I am ever making like a I don't know, like a great art film, and I need a shot that says, fuck, I know how to do it. And I know how that style would do it. So I think it's...
you will study that and work from there.
Exactly. You're just sort of like seeing the stylistic pieces like that, I think. And also, because it's really funny bad. And I do like that kind of thing. I definitely think I do watch these films to get inspiration for things like that. I do. I also enjoy them, but, I think you're influenced by everything you watch, even if you hate it.
Of course, and there's always a pleasurable thing in just watching something, even if it's not good. And there's something to enjoy from that. So
Yeah, exactly.
there are very few things that I regret watching, because even watching bad stuff, it makes you value the better stuff more,
Yeah.
but it also puts it in perspective.
Yeah,
I sometimes hear people who just try to watch only the best stuff ever made and stuff like that, and I think, well, that isn't worth much, because you can't put it into perspective and you start hating on stuff that is actually pretty good.
Agreed.
And not value that anymore because you're looking to nitpick. Or,
Yeah.
Well, maybe not even that, but in very small perspective, it's worse than something else, and you don't see the craft that went into it anymore.
I completely agree. And it's... I think the thing is that when you only watch sort of the great cinema of the world, you're losing context. You're losing the context of what the popular cinema was like at the time, what was successful but not necessarily critically lauded. And you're also losing the context of what's bad. Like what was where was the bad of that era, of the 70s, of the 80s, of the 2000s, of whatever, of America, of Japan, of Europe, all the different European cinemas. It's like, it's exciting and fun to see movies break. Like, it's exciting and fun to see movies work, but it's also fun to me to like see what the messes in between, and how they're sometimes more or less messy, and how sometimes by virtue of that mess just being so bizarre, it's like really fun. Like,
you get loads of these female protagonists in these romance stories who all get a job in publishing.
yes, yeah, very weird.
Which I find very strange. Especially in this one, because you might think it's sort of a wishful thinking thing of an up-and-coming novelist, that they are going to take the publishing world by storm because they know everything.
Right.
That. And 50 Shades Darker very much has that scene in it.
Yes.
Where she goes into that meeting for the first time.
And she suggests that they use the internet.
Exactly.
And is immediately...
And sell more books.
Yeah, sell more books and use the internet. And they're like, you're hired at this big firm. Yeah.
You're promoted a very big way up.
Yes. Yeah.
And they had to do that because in the book, apparently, it was Christian pulling the strings to get her there, but that doesn't work for the way they are portrayed in the movies. So.
Yeah, they're trying to make... One of the interesting screenwriting and filmmaking challenges of 50 Shades Darker is, how do you make this palatable? Because honestly, it's an abusive relationship, and like he's a creep. Yeah. He like looks up on his romantic partners and shit. He's like very.
He has detectives tailing them, even the ones who are only prospective.
He's like
partners.
Crazy predatory, and so truly the filmmaking hurdle that you have to jump over is, how do you make this work? How do you make this literally not creepy? Which is funny. Exactly. Which is also why I think that a lot of the things around it are portrayed in very life and death stakes, where it's truly like a violent rape or a woman with a gun to your head. It's like that is the things they have to overcome, because there's more than once that you kind of think, you could just dump him. Like, you could just not deal with this and go...
You can watch it and just go, red flag.
Yeah.
Red flag.
Yes.
Red flag.
Oh, my God.
Red flag.
And...
But the why I was turning to the question, like, it seems like wish fulfillment for the author. But E.L. James has a career in television, a very successful career.
Yeah.
In the production and stuff like that.
I think it's wish fulfillment for the audience is, I think, the thing. Probably. Because especially if you're reading something like a fanfic, let's say, then you would need, you would also want to be a prospective author, or at least are into reading, or at least into books. And so you're like, oh, I'm kind of a bookish girl, and you could see yourself being Anna. I also think the reason they did that is because in the original novels, as opposed to the movie, is to differentiate her from Bella. It's sort of one of the things that Bella is correctly accused of is barely doing anything in Twilight. It's all like things that are done to her because she's like so special. and so desirable and all this stuff. She's a Mary Sue, what we now know as a Mary Sue. And I think that Anastasia, they have to combat her Mary Sue-ness, basically, because they have to make her like, oh, but she's a self-kept woman. She gives the money back. And they even very cleverly in the movie make like he transfers $24,000 into her account as it's played as a joke beat where she goes, Christian, how do you have my bank information? And which is a very
that is a red flag.
It's a very real question. If I had been dating a woman or a guy for a bit and they were just like, don't worry, I transferred money into your account because I know your social security number. It's like it's scary. And so it plays that as
wait, what?
It plays that as a joke, and then has like a cute bit where she gives the money back in a charity auction, and so it's like trying to do this to combat how predatory and scary Christian is, and to make her seem more, once again, kind of into it.
But then when that's resolved at that point at the auction, he says, I don't know if I have to worship you or spank you. And then she goes, I'll go for the spanking option.
Because you have to remember she's into it. She is into it. And it's like that.
But I started the thing about the post thing also because the way it's written in there, it's about, her being bookish, but they thinly veil that the author of the books doesn't seem to have read much herself.
No. Dude.
Like, they say, I always go back to Austen and Bronte because nothing...
The most basic bitch literature. like exactly. You might as well be like... They might as well have had Anna, a publishing powerhouse, be like, I'm a Gryffindor. Like, it's like the most...
I feel the need.
The need for speed.
The first time you saw Darker, and you saw that end shot of Jack burning the cigarette through the thing. Did you realize it was him?
No, it was a discussion afterwards between me and my ex. We were pretty sure it was Jack Hyde, but we had to look it up on Wikipedia, yes. Because it's very unclear who the fuck that is or where he got a family portrait.
Well, they do show that.
Yes, they do. They do. The second time around, I caught it. But...
Yeah. But even the weirder thing of that is that he has no beef with Christian yet at that point. He's just there at the party and just thinks, I'm going to take a picture of that and creep her up.
The plot is planning ahead for him. It knows he needs to get to this point on the cliff with the cigarette. And it's like, fucking whatever. He takes a picture, whatever.
And it's also good, so beautiful how it ties in with the beginning, that cigarette, because it starts with the flashback of Christian, which does not come back anywhere in the movie.
That's filmmaking. One of my favorite, I was talking earlier about how Christian is kind of like this weird refraction of a Byronic protagonist. And my favorite thing with that is when at the very beginning, Anna's like, tell me about your past. And he says, my mother was an addict. Crack, you fill in the blanks. That is like
exactly
such it's like Occam's razor of like Byronic male protagonists. It's just like he's troubled, and you fill in the blanks. It's you
can fill in the blanks.
An incredible line of dialogue, honestly.
My first reaction was, wait, what?
What do you mean you fill in the blanks? It's a great film. Like I said, it's like camp to me somehow. It's like seeing a great camp film, and I don't. Yeah.
One of the things that they cut from the novel apparently was that he always talks about her. They kept in one bit of that, namely calling her my birth mother. Yeah, which is such a weird phrase.
It truly is. Yeah.
And then in the book, it's always the crack whore, my birth mother. Yeah. Always
the crack explaining whore. Which is like, oh man, it's so. I would kind of like to read just Darker one day, because it's like I've seen the Dan Olson series and I've read tiny bits of them. I've never owned one of the books.
Yeah.
But they seem really insufferable to get through. Like, they seem like really rough and very long. But I would
what you see in the Dan Olsen videos, those pieces of text from the book, those are the extracts. Wow.
Yeah, it just seems like there's a level of like fun bad reading, and then there's once again the level where you're like, this is just bad. Like, I'm not enjoying this. I want to put this down. And I think I would hit that with them, but I would be curious to read just darker, to be like, how did they adapt this? Like, how did they tone this down? Because it's very confrontational and violent and like angry and yeah, I would be curious about that, but I've never read them. You know, it is funny. I did read the first 40 pages of Twilight before it was a thing. The girl I was gonna go to prom with lent me this book. We were having like a date at her house and just hanging out. And she was like, I just read this new book. You might like it. And she gave me a copy of Twilight. And I had no idea what it was because it hadn't become Twilight yet. It was just like this weird book. And so I took it home, Maria's copy, and I read like the first 30 pages and I was like, I don't know, it's kind of boring, and I put it down, and I still have that copy of Twilight in my basement. And I never gave it back to her. I have never read more of it. Maria, I'm sorry. I should probably give you your copy of Twilight back. But that is my interaction with the books of that, and I never bothered reading the 50
That
Shades.
is your trophy from your youth, one of them.
Yes. A funny thing, I ended up not going to prom with her either, so I think I just have her book. I hope she's
Does
doing
you
well.
having the book tie into that? Like, now I'm not going to return that anymore either.
Yeah. Oh, man. Maybe that's why it didn't work out, because she was like, oh no, he stole my copy of Twilight. Weird. But yes, that's true.
Oh, man. One thing that also is very funny to me is that 50 Shades Darker and 50 Shades Freed are directed by the same dude who also directed Glengarry Glen Ross.
Yes. And
An epitome of just male...
And an episode of Twin Peaks, too.
Yeah.
He's got a weird...
Yeah, he's done a lot of television.
Yeah, he's got a weird career. And it's like... he did, I think, an episode of House of Cards, too. Like, he did a couple episodes of Hannibal. It's like, well, it's also funny because with 50 Shades of Grey, they found a female director and we're very proud of that. And we're like, you know, this is a woman's vision of
Sam
this.
Taylor Johnson. She'd previously done Nowhere Boy, the movie about a young John Lennon.
Yep. And she's like a smart woman. She's like a talented woman. And she tried to make 50 Shades of Grey a real movie, and it didn't work. It's boring. And so they were like, can we just give it to a dumb man? And they found this dude. And it was like, it was, the man met the moment, as they say, in my opinion. But
it's just a guy who gets things done.
Yes. He is a workhorse director. It's like, truly, this is a $55 million Lifetime movie. Like, it's just sort of, that's what it is. And yeah, I don't know. I love it. What a good time. Were you not entertained?
Oh, yeah, you're going to pull Russell Crowe on me. Are you not entertained?
It's all I thought yesterday watching this. I'm like, yes, I am. I am, honestly. But yeah.
Improvement-Dazio.
I think that I would probably enjoy this more if it was actually in some way a sort of soft porn or erotica movie.
Yeah.
More explicit. I think that we should at least see Christian's penis at some point.
Honestly, seeing Christian's penis is the one thing I would change. I do agree with that. I'm like, we see so much full frontal nudity from Dakota Johnson, and I'm just like,
I've only seen her breasts I'm sorry.
I believe it happens in the third one, but maybe not. But yeah, regardless, I'm like, show me. I want to see Christian's penis.
It is.
It was too bad because I think it would add to it. Honestly, I think it would make it better.
One thing that I would probably also change about the film is that I would keep one thing in from the book, just to be more honest about what it is, and it's this. You know why it's out, and Dan Olsen also addressed it in the movie. That's how I know that it's in. But just this bit of dialogue where he says, I am a sadist, Anna. I like to whip little brown-haired girls like you because you look like the crack whore, my birth mother. And maybe not the end of it. That is maybe a bit too much, but I like to whip little girls.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty... It would make him more dangerous. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agreed. Soft agree.
And all about his S&M stuff is about him liking that. It's not how they do try to make it into he has an issue from birth that's connected to it, now from being young that's connected to it.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's also in this sentence, but it's also about him just liking to do that. I like to whip.
Yeah. I know what you mean. I could see that.
Yeah. And I maybe would recast the leads.
I love Dakota Johnson in it. I really do.
Okay.
But I could see somebody else as Christian. I could.
Especially that.
Yeah.
And I actually thought I've seen a couple of awkward scenes from the Canyons. I haven't seen the whole movie, but I think the James Dean, Lindsay Lohan combo might work very well for 50 Shades of Grey.
Whoa! I would be really curious to see that. I would be interested in that actually. Yeah. Interesting.
I'm not going to say it's the best thing, but it's an idea.
Yeah.
That I thought, it could be good. And then you wouldn't have a guy who would have issues to show his dick on screen.
Yes. You know what's funny is I think that Robert Pattinson would be better as Christian than he is as Edward. I think that especially now that he's a little older and like is actually doing good movies, I'm would be curious.
I can see him doing that. Yeah. And he would be way more charming. If he does it like the way he acted in Tenet, he is very charming in that stuff like that. That would be very
He's
good.
a terrific actor.
Yeah.
Both him and Kristen Stewart are like have just gotten better and better and better in like as they've gone on.
I'm sure they were very good when they did Twilight. It's just that this has stuck to them.
Absolutely.
And I especially like that, especially Kristen Stewart. She really sticks to herself being in Twilight. She knows how important it was for her, but she also really thanks Stephanie Myers for being in them and creating those books and stuff like that. She's very upfront about that. I'm going to stick by my choice.
And I think they should be, because the fact of the matter is they did it right. They got a big blockbuster franchise that made them famous. They made their money. And now they're doing things they actually wanted to do, where it's like, I want to be a more interesting actor. It would have been so easy for both of them to just coast by on the fact that they're hot, and just sort of be starlets. And both of them were like, no, I'm more interested in doing something different. And I really respect both of them for it. I think they are talented people, very talented.
The last thing I wrote down, I'm sure that I won't get you because you're way too tickled with how good the film looks, but I thought that something this trashy should maybe not look this expensive.
Yeah, I think that if I joked on Twitter once that my dream project is to remake 50 Shades Darker, but do it right. and I think that if I was ever handed that task, I agree with you. It's sort of... I think it looks too television. I would be more curious to see how it would look grosser. So I'm with you, but I do love the weird disconnect between it being that polished and just being not worthy of it.
Maybe you could do one in 40 years when the rights are free again.
That's my final film is 50 Shades Darker, and it's a period piece. That is going to be your the famed 10th movie of Quentin Tarantino will be. This will be yours. It'll be my Fitzcarraldo. It really is what it is. Yeah, that's a good idea.
And if you don't get the right to it, you can always do it in the way that they did the original Nosferatu. Just change the names
or dare I say. The original.
It is how 50 Shades even.
I was gonna say the original Master of the Universe, maybe. Whoa, that's actually a really interesting idea. I'm like having more and more. Just okay, interesting. I'll think about it.
I asked you for a watch list, 3 recommendations for the listeners.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what you have in store.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
I saw a lot of great movies recently. Over the holidays.
Tip 1!
I missed when it first came out Portrait of a Lady on Fire. I think that is an incredible film. great double feature with 50 Shades Darker. No, but it is. I really love Siama. I loved her film Tomboy too, and I've only seen those two now. I loved Tomboy when I first saw it, and I didn't follow up with the rest of her work, and so I'm really excited to do that now. Yeah, if you haven't seen Portrait of a Lady on Fire, it is just an incredibly good film. I adored it.
I thought it was one of the most beautiful looking films from last year.
Agreed. It's funny to me that it keeps getting tossed into, and I understand why, but it keeps getting tossed into sort of feminist film discussions where there's a lot going on in it, too, about just the artist versus object of desire and just the nature of looking and being seen. It's brilliant. It's a fucking great film. So that.
Tip 2!
I saw Joint Security Area by Park Chan-wook earlier last week. Park Chan-wook is my favorite director, and he's the man who did Old Boy, The Handmaiden. And Joint Security Area was his first feature. And it's really interesting to see because he just emerges fully formed. And it's very good. It's maybe his most commercial movie, but it's like he's doing really interesting visual stuff with it. Song Kang-ho is in it, who was in Parasite and is just an amazing actor. And I have a very slow-flying obsession with North Korea. And so it takes place at the demilitarized zone between the Koreas in 1999. Right. And it's just really fucking good. It's just like a fun, interesting thriller that's also an interesting look into the Korean War from the ongoing Korean War, but from a man in Korea. It's really goddamn good.
Tip 3!
And I've been on a very real Kelly Reichardt kick, who's an American director that I really love as well. And
I've only seen 2 films of her. But
I just saw Certain Women, and really, it was the last one I had to see, and I really loved it. I thought Certain Women was just great. So really interesting movie, and
this one I'm yet to watch.
And
but
hey,
it's very probable that I'll watch him.
Yeah, Kristen Stewart's in it.
Right. Yeah.
So you can piggyback it off your Twilight rewatch. But no, it's very goddamn good. I mean, I think Kelly Reichardt's incredible. I'd love to.
I just watched First Cow and I was amazed by it. I really loved it.
Definitely also check out
Tip 3.5.
Night Moves. Night Moves is very
I haven't
good.
seen that one either, so that's also good.
She's just, there's something so interestingly quiet about her movies. Like really gorgeously lived in. And I don't know. I think she's an incredible artist, and I wish she was better known around the world. So yeah, she's so interested in the interior of people, of just sort of what thoughts they're thinking and not voicing. And I think she's brilliant at it. Both her and Siama. So it's funny because I'm just, I think, in that place recently. I really would love, it's funny maybe coming from the guy who did VelociPastor, but I'd love to do a movie like that. I really would. I'm like, I've never found a story that I think is worthy of it, worthy of like working in that tone. So it's interesting. Right. I think I will, but maybe I'm just trying to get ideas right now. After Outback Dracula, Outbackula.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are my 3 recommendations, yes.
All right.
Those 3 films. They're all really good. They're nothing like VelociPastor or 50 Shades Darker.
I have kind of lots of episodes where people say, I'm not going to listen to that because I haven't watched the film. And I think this is one where we can safely say, well, you don't need to watch the film before you listen to it.
You might, in fact, have more fun listening to me enthuse about it than watching the film itself. So I hope everybody enjoyed the podcast. If they want to find me, I'm on Twitter and Instagram and all that, at Brendan Steere. If they haven't seen VelociPastor, it's vastly pirated online. No, it's hopefully available in your territory. It's on American Amazon if you have a VPN.
And so we fought and we battled as we beat each other up. Both of us tried hard, we both failed. Yes, I had you by the thumbs, but neither of us won. Only the love for cinema prevailed.
And that's it. Did you like it? I hope you did. I certainly did. Thank you for listening anyway, and also very many thanks first to Brendan Steere for making the time for a very silly conversation, which I, again, really dug. And also, of course, many thanks to Theodore for making this possible. All right, do I have any recommendations myself? I watched Reds, the movie by Warren Beatty, and I really, really dug it. It's quite an interestingly weird movie. It sort of marries the styles of Warren Beatty's earlier collaborator, Hal Ashby, with whom he made Shampoo, and sort of the movie-making styles of David Lean, and it tells an epic about an American communist in the Russian Revolutionary War, which is an interesting thing to make in 1981. Also, I'm preparing to appear on an Oscar-related podcast, Film Fans podcast, Dutch podcast. And for that, I watched one of the documentaries that was nominated for an Oscar this year, Time, about the family of a black man in the US who has been incarcerated for 60 years for a bank robbery, and what it does to them. All the time that he misses is being recorded in this movie, and it is quite a watch. What they've done on a filmic level is quite astounding. You can watch it on Amazon Prime. Also, I watched a new Netflix movie, a Japanese movie called Ride or Die, and that's a manga adaptation. It's about a young woman who gets a phone call from another woman whom she was in love with 10 years ago, and she asks her to kill her husband for her, which she does, and then they go on the run together. It's a movie that changes tone quite a lot of the time and somehow manages to do it as well. A big surprise for me, Ride or Die. Anyway, so this was a cinema production, and it was presented and edited by me, Ruud, the 20ste Eeuwse Vos, and it contains jingles by the genius that is Roy Grutters. It's also been made possible by the support of our patrons, Casey the Great, Onno Lubbers, Edwin, and of course Niels Timmer. And if you'd also like to become a patron, go to patreon.com/duimpjeworstelen. And also you can find us on social media, Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, and you can send all your hate mail to duimpjeworstelen@gmail.com. Alright, that is it for this time. We'll see you again in a couple of weeks, and we'll be back with another movie that you probably will not have watched, but you can listen to the podcast anyway. Alright, cheerio, bye-bye. Ta-da.
Ladies and gentlemen, could we have an enormous round of applause, please, for our host, who has once again succeeded in bringing to us a plethora of top-notch, cinematographically themed entertainment. We have had an absolute ball, have we not? Next time on Thumb Wrestling.
Maar ja, ik vind het heel lekker als een film CGI gebruikt, maar dan niet om je te laten denken dat het een live-action film is. En dat het zo realistisch mogelijk is. Maar juist denkt van nee, we gaan een complete, maffe, bonkers fantasiewereld van maken.
This podcast employs a strict only like and subscribe if you really want to policy. Okay, bye.